Okay, let's talk Chelsea versus Brighton. Now, there's a lot I want to get through in today's video because there's some good stuff that I really want to sort of touch on from the first half, which has been clouded over, of course, by the poor result. But I do think that it's worth touching on it, so I don't want to just sort of glaze over it. We're going to go over that stuff. Of course, then we'll talk about sort of the second half, the changes, a bit of the timeline, which is what we did after the Manchester United game, and sort of go through what happened there. Please do drop a like. Any questions about this game, I will try and get to in the comments. So please do sort of leave your comments. Really try and support this video because I want to break down exactly what we've seen in this game. And then there's also a short on my channel sort of talking about the Maresca sort of situation. That's also come out today. So if you haven't seen that already, that's like a 2-3 minute short video as well. So if you could go check that one out, then that will also help you to sort of understand sort of my thoughts on Enzo Maresca as a whole, because that is something that is just, for me, getting blown completely out of proportion when you sort of take into account exactly how things are happening in terms of red card, squad, the squad development, not even development, the squad configuration and how it's all sort of coming together and working. So, by the way, if you can see that it lighting up my screen, it's because I'm looking at a document because I don't want to miss parts of this video that sort of I wanted to touch on. So I've sort of got my notes up to make sure that we don't miss bits that I didn't want to miss. So, first of all, this is the first team that don't play a back five against us in the league. Maresca changed the shape, much more fluidity, and the first half, probably our best half of the season, right? I love what we did here on the ball. With that sort of 4-1, essentially what you could call this is the 4-1 in build-up. So you got the 4 across the back, you've got the fullbacks stretching here, you've got the wingers pinning really high, and then what you've got in the middle is essentially just a midfield three. But Caicedo was sort of as that lone pivot. And what you then had with the opportunity for both of these players to do is drop in to these areas. Now, if they dropped in, sometimes Esteban would push up, James would go into this area, and he was able to get into those areas where he assisted for the goal. And platforming James in this formation and this sort of system was probably my favourite part about it, because what you're doing with Reece James here is, with the amount of fluidity and the amount of positions James can occupy. In this game, you saw James occupying sometimes in this sort of wide right back position, sort of nominal right back, where he isn't sort of being asked to do loads of running, but he's just sort of in this position for the first phase of build-up. Sometimes Santos was pushed up higher and James was actually coming into midfield, and sort of Esteban dropped a bit deeper, and it was becoming a little bit lopsided in that sense. Fernandes was there a bit higher and James was sort of dropping into here to get on the ball a little bit and get his touches in the middle of the pitch. Again, you're limiting his workload by doing this. However, what it also allows for is that, like I say, when Santos goes in there, James sort of made a run in there, Esteban went inside, and James made this run forward. You still get to see those moments of quality from James in the areas that you guys want him to be in, without him having to do these lung-busting runs from right back, and then having to also then recover back into position and do that for a constant 90 minutes. Now, I think this is a huge step from Maresca, and I think it will get massively overlooked because of how the game went. But this was a huge positive, and the fact that we was able to use the midfield three that we did and have so much fluidity with how they occupy different heights of the midfield. There were so many good rotations in this game. Again, Cucurella at times, they were able to come inside, and we're going to show some examples of this in a minute, where these guys would sort of push higher. The wingers were doing really good to sort of pin their fullbacks so that the fullback couldn't jump on to these wider sort of wing backs, and using this double width, essentially, if I just get up the sort of this, using this double width in the first phase was pinning their fullbacks and making their wingers have to sit wider, which was opening lots of space in the middle for these rotations and sort of these movements, and even João Pedro dropping in. A lot of movement in the middle, a lot of different sort of fluid movements to get off and create space for one another, which was then able to sort of help us in that first half. And like I say, it was a dominant first half performance. It was really, really good. João Pedro was dropping in at times. Andre Santos was making good runs to sort of make sure that we were still occupying that last line, because that's a problem we've had lately when João Pedro has been through the middle on his own, and he sort of has that tendency to drop in, which we all know about. He's dropping in, and then you've got players that aren't really making those runs in behind. You've got that lack of runners. Whereas right now, what Santos was doing, he, despite not being a natural runner, he was looking to try and occupy that last line, because that is important if João Pedro is going to drop in. And I like the fact that we did that. Now, first half, I think there's just it's just so positive, and you can talk about all those sort of rotations. Really good step in the right direction from Maresca, because like I said last season, the second season details for me have to be around finding a little bit more fluidity in the team in terms of rotations and being able to sort of lose your man markers, especially in man-to-man pressing schemes, and get people into sort of those creative zones and give them space to work in. And I think that this, especially with how platform Reece James, was perfect to do that. So brilliant, and he deserves a lot of credit for that setup. Now, that takes us into sort of the second half. Now, Chalobah, sent off. Mistakes, inexperience, errors, all of these things is what's costing us. Maresca said it, we're giving away presents, we're giving away gifts. And if you're going to do this, you're going to drop points. Now, we're talking about right now what's being said about Maresca being sacked. And I said this in the short that I was talking about. People are saying that because of his management in the red card games that he should be sacked. Firstly, we've had 2 red cards, and of our last 5 losses, 4 of them have had red cards in them. We've been down to 10 men. Now, could he have made a few different decisions? Against Manchester United, I think taking Neto off so early was definitely wrong. And in this game, you could argue that taking Neto off wasn't the correct decision. But you can see the logic, and people often sort of moan at Maresca for not being proactive. But in this game, he was proactive. He looked to make a change and stop something that was quite obviously hurting us even before the goal. He made the change, and yes, it still ended up hurting us. Gusto played poor. He allowed the crosses into the box. He wasn't tight enough to Minter, and there was things that came from it. It stemmed bad results. But it doesn't mean that the change wasn't the correct change. It's just hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. So if we sort of look at what happened, Acheampong came on, Santos went off. So then what we had is we had Hato as that left centre-back, Acheampong as that right centre-back, and Reece and Cucurella as that sort of back 4. Then you had Caicedo, Fernandes, and then you had João Pedro, Neto, and Esteban. Now we stayed with this sort of 4-4-1 until a little bit later in the game. It sort of about 5 to 10 minutes after that red card. And what you could see is what they were looking to do is they were looking to drag these sort of markers away over to this side of the pitch, including Esteban. And they were looking to Van Heck from this sort of position in here, sort of from this back line, was looking to spray those passes when this line was shuffled and isolate the winger 1v1. And it was Matoma at the time. Not sure where people are getting the idea that it was Minter, because Minter didn't switch sides until Matoma went off the pitch. So that was after Gusto was already on the pitch. And James did get beaten a few times, and even when he wasn't beaten, the ball was still going into the box. Now, what's the problem with this? If the ball's going into the box, your 2 box defenders are Jarell Hato and Josh Acheampong. Now, Josh Acheampong just come back from illness. I'm a big fan of Josh Acheampong, but he's inexperienced. Hato, inexperienced in the Premier League. He's not tall as it is. He's not a brilliant box defender as it is. He's more of an aggressor, sort of to do his work outside the box and force people away with that intense pressing and being aggressive, jumping out the back line. So you're getting balls into the box, and these are your 2 defensive outlets. So what do you do? What he does, in my opinion, is extremely clever, because you take off Esteban and you bring in Gusto. Now, Gusto is playing as that right wing back. So now what happens here is you're shifting everything across, and you've got a back 5. So you've now got the opportunity to not only double up on their best winger, because Matoma went on after Gusto, but you're doubling up on one of their wingers with Gusto and James. So that's already a good sign, because Gusto can aggress, James can sort of cover, and he can be that secondary defender. That's completely fine. What it also means is if those balls are coming into the box early, if they get past Gusto and then look for an early delivery before James can get out to it, James is now in a better position to actually defend the cross himself and be a little bit more of a box defender who has a little bit more experience, a little bit more of his head screwed on in that sense to defend the box. And you got to think, this is all Chelsea had at their disposal. Badiashile came on late in the game, but again, only just returned from injury. So these are the defensive options that Chelsea have right now. And then you have Caicedo, you have Fernandes, and then you're still leaving Neto on the pitch, because then as well, Neto sort of dropping into here. But then what you have with Gusto and Neto, and again, people might not like this, but what Chelsea lack right now is those runners. And we've spoke about that in pre-season quite a lot. Now, yes, you've got Garnacho on the bench, but Clee doesn't trust him. And you've got a few players like in this sense, even with Gittins, for example. But then what you get is how you can then break from this block is you have João Pedro, who can receive the ball and hold it up, which is something he's done quite well. If you can get the ball to his feet, he can sort of even swarmed by pressure, he can be press resistant. He can keep that ball, and then he can sort of put it off either side. Gusto and Neto as your outlet runners. You've got one on each side. You've got two people that are willing to run. One thing that Gusto, even on his worst games, is good for is he is a runner. He will work hard. He's got an engine, and he will use that. And I think that that makes a lot of sense as to have this. Now, Gusto playing badly. Not, in my opinion, he should have took that touch in on goal. I went crazy when that didn't happen, when Fernandes put him through and he sort of looked to sort of keep the ball and he didn't take it through on goal. That I don't agree with whatsoever. I think he should have absolutely took it through on goal. But the change in itself, like I say, it just because it didn't work out, I don't think that it's just as simple as saying it was a poor change. The other changes that followed, the one that you can maybe speak about is Neto, of course, because again, you need to have an outlet. Now, we took Neto off for Lavia, who isn't there for some reason. So let me just do this. Neto off for Lavia. And let's just put Badia. Badia Shield came on as well for Hato. Now, that was a like-for-like swap. Makes sense. Badia Shield a little bit more box defending as well. So, again, makes sense. But what's happening again with how much they were looking to squeeze us on this side of the pitch, Casado was sort of getting dragged back into this position as well, where James was sort of covering. So then what was happening is a lot of space was coming in around Enzo Fernandes. There was a lot of space carved out for them to use. And again, this is giving you a threat. So what you look to do is obviously that's why you took off Neto, because you want to protect that space and put another body in here, because that is too easily being accessed right now. However, yes, what you do then do is you lose an outlet. Now, if Garnacho was more trusted and he didn't sort of have such a blip against Brentford where we conceded the goal and it's like, again, it was offside, but he switched off at the back post. If there was a bit more trust in him, maybe you take off Fernandes instead, put on Garnacho or even Gittins. Let's just do this. And you tell them like they have to sort of be a body in here, or João Pedro drops in to be a body in there, and you sort of have that player as an outlet on the break. Yes, that would make a little bit more sense to have that outlet. But I think the fact that we're talking about this game as if Chelsea just should have won with 10 men just because we were 1-0 up, I just think it's ridiculous. I think that you lose a man, so you immediately give up. Like, they will have more possession than you. That is just, like, statistically, that is naturally what will happen. You are more likely to concede. You're more likely to concede possession as well. And by doing that, you're asking your players to have to defend more. Because even if you do start like finding your outlet, even if you have an outlet and you continue to find them, you're going to get a little bit of respite for like 30 seconds and you might be able to get sort of a break from it and get something from it, get a corner and try to create from there. But then you're going to end up sort of reverting to the mean, coming back into your position and having to defend again. And you are just naturally going to have to do it. And we're not set up in a way to defend, especially if you don't make that change and you don't go to a back five. And James is the one being dragged out here, and you've just got a Chempong and Hato or Badia Shield sort of defending that space. We almost certainly, we still would have conceded, definitely. Like, people will like to argue that we was comfortable in that game, but I think that Maresca, rightly so, saw that we wasn't comfortable in that game when Van Heck started finding those continuous switches of play before the change was even made. So that's sort of where I lie on this. I don't think the changes were poor. I think the outcome was poor, which is what hurt the game. And I think that it's the mistakes and the squad building that are really starting to hurt Chelsea. And it's getting to the point where it's becoming really, really tough to watch Maresca suffer for this. And like I say, I'm not trying to say that Maresca is completely faultless, because against Manchester City last season, one game specifically that I really didn't like how he sort of coached that game. Then he had a really good run, sort of back end of the season, Club World Cup, of course. And then this season, yes, the Manchester United one, whilst I don't think it was primarily his fault because you get a red card after 5 minutes, I think instantly you're on the back foot. I would have kept Neto on the pitch. So that's a decision that I do naturally disagree with. But I think the fact that he's the one getting like the most sort of discontent from this is just absolutely wild to me. A few other things, like 2 red cards, 15 yellow cards. The discipline is clearly an issue. 6 errors leading to goals in 8 games was just ridiculous. Like I said, Garnacho and Gittins, they're just not trusted, and that's partly to do with the squad building. You've got rid of Madueke and Jackson, who had somewhat earned trust. Now, yes, Jackson getting red cards as well. Of course, like these players hadn't like fully deserved the trust maybe at all times, especially Jackson with those red cards. But Maresca had worked with them, and you've seen it already. He's gone for Tyreek George over Gittins and Garnacho at points this season. And I think it's just a trust thing, and it's going to take time now for Maresca to develop those relationships and be comfortable with the coaching details that he's given to those players. Fatigue is another one that I needed to mention, because people say about why we're looking to control the ball so much, slow down the tempo. You're looking to minimize the ground that you're having to cover in transition and the amount of defending you're having to do. I said this on Sky Sports, there was a segment today which I wasn't overly sort of happy with, in the sense that I didn't really get to rebuttal a few of the points. But the bit that I did say that I was happy with is the reason that we're sort of playing the way we are and being so slow on the ball at times and slowing the tempo down is not to benefit us going forward, or to even just have that sort of, you're not looking to control the game to be really good on the offensive end. You're looking to control the game because you don't want to keep making these mistakes and errors by continuously asking players to defend that, one, aren't comfortable, two, are inexperienced, and three, are just doing a poor job of it right now. So you're trying to minimize that. And I think last season, that's what worked so well. We minimized that at the back end of the season by being really controlling on the ball. And again, like, yes, Sanchez, we sort of took the responsibility of him away to continue to go short. We took that away and made him go long. But we was a little bit more controlled in the centre, and less mistakes were occurring because of it. And then we wasn't sort of coming under the cosh and hurting ourselves, shooting ourselves in the foot. So it's a tough one to really speak about, because I don't think Maresca is completely faultless, but I think that for the few things that he has done wrong, I think there's so many more positives to take. And especially that first half, I thought was absolutely brilliant, until the mistakes from Andre Santos and then Chalobah, they compound. And when you compound mistakes, we said it in the last video about Manchester United, the compounded mistakes leading to a red card, it never ends well. So we're going to end the video on that note. I've touched on basically everything I wanted to speak on. The trust, the sort of injuries and things like that. Like I say, watch the short if you haven't watched that already, because that's just sort of reiterating a few points about Enzo Maresca. Any questions, please do get to me, because I think we're going to do a live stream tomorrow. So this goes out Monday. The live stream on Tuesday will be before the Benfica game, and then I'll also record a Benfica review after the Benfica game. So lots of content coming on the channel. Please support, do everything you can. I'm really, really grateful, because I'm now getting opportunities to go on Sky Sports and speak about these things. And it's exactly like, it's really, really a dream come true in that sense. So please continue to support me and the channel. And any questions, like I say, I'll try to get to them. But if not, we'll cover them in tomorrow's live stream. So if you can make it there, that'd be brilliant as well. And yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one of the Chelsea.